Okay, so we've finished drawing half our Lotus. If I remove the background layer, you can see our Lotus there. So it's looking pretty good. What we need to do now is we need to come back to Photoshop, and we'll finish off complete our Lotus in Photoshop. So to do that, there's a couple of ways you can do it, but here I just come down to this menu that's at the bottom right hand side of the layer that we're working on. Click on that and then export layer. Now the only important thing to check here is we need to make sure you're in PNG, because that's if you go to JPEG, it won't export the transparency. It'll just be it'll have a white background with all your line work stuck to it. So you need to be PNG, portable network graphic. Give yourself a name up here, and off you go. That'll save away. We'll come back to Photoshop. We'll open that up. There it is. We'll just get that document to float. We'll drag it down and select V for the move tool, and then we'll just drag that layer straight off into our working document. And there it is. So now we'll just position it back up here. Doesn't matter, doesn't have to be super accurate at this point, just so that you see that you've done all the line work correctly. You're back to your starting point. We don't need our traced image anymore, so we can get rid of that. So we'll just turn that off. So that's great. So now what we need to do is, before we mirror that and join that into two sides so that it's a completed image, it's going to save us a little bit of time if we correct our line work on one half, because then when we duplicate it, we'll have already done the work for the second half. So there's lots of places that need some work. So let's clean up any hesitant lines or any gaps, anything like that. The reason I do this in Photoshop is because the eraser tool in ArtRage is not fantastic, much more accurate and easier to use in Photoshop. So it's just a matter of running around our image and correcting any parts. You can also, for example, sharpen up some of these brush points. So I'm just going between the brush and the eraser tool here. You can sharpen that up a bit. One thing you want to avoid, it isn't really clear why you want to do it at this stage, but you want to avoid, it's okay to have a very sharp line here where this line is contained by a solid area of colour, meaning it'll be blue on this side and blue on this side, but you want to avoid coming down to a sharp line where colours are going to change. So an example of that is if I had a very sharp line here, like that, this is going to be blue and that's going to be pink. You want to avoid that, and the reason why we want to avoid it will become later when we start working in Photoshop. But basically you need to have any area where there's intermediate pixels will create what would you say, corruption in the color values. If you change the color of this multiple times and the color of that's on the other side multiple times, all these little intermediate pixels get sort of corrupted over time, and you end up with some very fluorescent looking colors, and you'll have to go around and manually edit those. And if you've got like 50 or 100 of those to do, that's a lot of work. So you want to make sure you follow a few basic rules, meaning that where there's different colours on either side of a line, don't go to a very fine point unless you absolutely have to. So we just draw a little bit fatter line because we hesitated a little bit there. A bit of a point on here. Here we just hesitated a little bit, so we just join that up here. So you may think this is like a little bit pedantic, but Thangka is a spiritual piece of art, and it needs to be as accurate and as good as you can get it, just to your ability. I mean, we can't all do things to the same level, but it just needs to be the best you can do. And always, you know, if you're doing spiritual art, you should always think of that and try not to be lazy. Just always make everything as good as it can be. You may find in the digital age that your work, if you do good work, it may last a long, long time, and many people will benefit from it. So very important to bear that in mind. Okay, so that's about as much as I'll do. You can do that, you know, depending on how you've drawn your lines, you may have to do more or less. That's fine for me. We can now do our mirroring process. So to do that, there's a couple of things you can do. All I do is I just drag the layer we're working on down here into the new layer icon, and that will create another layer. When you're working, you really want to label all your layers, because you'll have you know, easily maybe 30 layers when you're doing a large work. So there's our layer. At the moment we don't see it because it's sitting directly below the other layer. So now we need to mirror it. There's a number of ways we can do that. We can perform a transform operation, or we can just go edit, like a free transform, meaning Control T, or we can go transform, flip on the horizontal axis. And so there it is. Then now it's just a matter of dragging it. And what we want to achieve here is we want this point and that point to match up. So we'll just zoom in. And that's great, that's what we want. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of overlap here and a lot of stuff going on. So we're going to press enter to complete that transformation. And what we need to do now is we need to erase the images that overlap. So the easiest way to do that is just to reduce the opacity on the image that you're hoping to erase. What I might do is I'll go from red to black now, because that'll make life a little bit easier. So to change the colour of that image, you need to lock the transparency, and you can just do press D for default colours, and you can go Alt Delete, and that will fill with that colour, protecting the transparent aspects of the pixel. So now we've got a huge contrast between our two layers, and we can erase accordingly. So select your eraser tool for E. Make sure you've got the right layer selected. So we're trying to erase our red line here. Now it's going to be tempting to say that I'm going to just create symmetry straight down the middle here. That's going to be too perfect. So the reason why we traced this central petal completely is that we want to have that complete that complete petal there, because that's going to be asymmetrical, and we want that asymmetry. So we just keep going here. Now at some point you're going to get confused about what to erase and what not to, but that's just something you're going to have to work out. So really it's just a matter of looking at the picture, and at this point you need to decide what to get rid of and what to keep. I am going to, I think I'm going to get rid of all of that. Okay, so that's not looking too bad. We've done pretty nicely there. The only area we have to correct is here, so maybe what I'll do is, I think the easiest way to correct that is to do that. Let's bring that layer back up to full opacity, lock the opacity, and we'll go Command Alt backspace, and that will bring us to black again. And then we just need to draw in Photoshop. I might pop this on a fresh layer to make life a little bit easier. We had that little bit of a curve down the bottom there, so we'll just make sure we keep that. Now the only thing I need to do is to create a line here, and you'll see that that's going to be tough to do in Photoshop. I'll pop up a new layer and I'll have a crack at it. If this is problematic, you might have to take it back into ArtRage to do it, but let's see if I can throw a line here. It's going to be half accurate. So that's near good. That's not too bad. It's not, I mean, it's a much different quality line. If I was doing it properly, I'd probably try and throw that line another 10 or 20 times to get it right, or I'd take it back into ArtRage. But you can see that the smoothing option really helps. But for this tutorial, you know, we don't want it to go on for too long. So what I'll do is I'll merge those layers down, Command E, Command E, Command E. So that's now all on one layer, and we are sweet. We're good to go. Save it, and there's our Lotus. Now the only thing left to do in this tutorial is to draw the Parry Cup, and we'll do that, sorry, not the Parry Cup, the sun or the moon cushion. And we're not going to use the brush tool for that, we're going to use the pen tool. So we'll do that in the next section. Okay, so here we are back in Photoshop. We're just going to draw this last part of the Lotus, which is in this case it's the sun cushion. I'm going to draw that with the pen tool so we get it nice and accurate. You could try this with the brush, but man, it'd be hard to get that right. In ArtRage you can maybe have a crack at it, but for something like this, it's you know, wants to be very accurate. The pen tool can actually work here. As I said, I don't use the pen tool all that often, so bear with me while I have a crack at this. So if you've used this, is called vector drawing, and it's just, actually I won't do that. I'll start up here somewhere. I'll come to here, here, and then there. And then it's just a matter of dragging your control points until you get a very nice, smooth line. Now we don't have to follow exactly what the artist has done here. I'll probably need more control points if I wanted to accurately get this section here. I'm not going to get that without this line overlapping here. When you're doing something symmetrical, obviously your control points, or control horns I think they're called, need to be, you know, approximately the same length and same angle. Okay, so let's say that's right. It looks pretty good to me. What I'm going to do, sun cushion bows up a little bit in the middle, which is interesting. Now that we've got that, what we need to do is stroke, what's called stroke that line. So we need to definitely make sure this goes on another layer. We come across here into paths. So if you don't have paths showing, you can go to window, come down here to paths, click that. This is your work path. Right click on that, and then you want to stroke the path, which means to draw a brush line around the perimeter of that mark. Here the brush comes up automatically. We don't want to have simulate pressure in this example. Brush is the thing you want, and the brush that you have needs to be our pre-selected to our correct line weight, which if you remember is 8 pixels. So let's have a go. I'm pretty sure I didn't change the brush size. Oh, I probably did actually. So let's see what it comes up with. We'll zoom right in. Now line is, I'd say it's marginally thin. So let's go B to our brush tool and see what we've actually got. So yeah, it's on 4 pixels. So let's come up. I'll come up to 5 and 6 pixels. We don't have to erase this. We'll just go straight back over the top of it. Stroke path, brush. Okay, and that line's approximately the same weight as our other. Then just click off the working path, which will deselect it. Back to layers. Remove our background image. And there is our Lotus. Now what we've done here is I wasn't really paying attention, and we've come up a little bit short there. So let's see if we can, what happens if we move that across. Yeah, so we can do that, and then we can just hand paint in here. There's Lotus, the rear view of the Lotus petals as they come around the back. Generally you'll have perhaps another Lotus here, but by the time you start getting to this second Lotus petal, generally the knee of the deity or the scarf will start to obscure. So I generally don't draw that until I've actually positioned the deity on top and you actually see what you're dealing with in this area. And just so you don't find yourself doing extra work. I'll just try and quickly finish that off. Save it. There we have it. That's our finished Lotus. The only other thing we have to do is remember I spoke about the 80% rule. Now you may choose to do this, you may not. Already we have a fair degree of asymmetry built in because we kept this central petal. But if you want to just devolve this a little bit more, then what you can do is you come down, merge your layers. So you're working on one layer. And then you just want to add a little bit of variation. Okay, so 80% rule to me means I want it to be 80% perfect, not 100%. So Command T, and all I do is I just move up into the this little selection, this little transformation option. I'm not sure what that's called, but it gives you a great deal of fairly subtle control, and you just need to do a little bit of something like this. Not much. Okay. It's just, I'm just sort of doing random stuff there. It's nothing, nothing particularly artistic about that. Let's press return. I'll go Command Z and I'll toggle between the two versions. So that's perfect. That's with a bit of asymmetry. Perfect asymmetry. So I like the asymmetry. I'm going to keep that. To me that looks, it's just, those details are important. And as I said, that's the 80% rule, 80% perfection. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. Next tutorial we're going to create what's called color flats. So we're going to look at producing channels so that we can color the image. And then the third tutorial, which I'll do based on this particular image, we'll be looking at shading and rendering and looking at producing a work again which mimics a Thangka. So we'll add some texture, a little bit of variation, some noise, things like that. So again, I hope you've enjoyed it. Happy painting. It's a very beautiful thing to paint the deities, and I hope you enjoy it and you get a lot from this tutorial series. Okay.